All right, so today we're back with my friend Evangelos Simoudis of Synapse Partners. His blog is at corporateinnovation.co. We are recording this on the morning of October 14th. And if you want to learn more about the topics we're discussing, go to the episode notes at the dataexchange.media. If you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. If you're listening to this on a podcast, subscribe wherever you get your podcast. So, topic number one, layoffs. Big item in the news. And the speculation is a lot of these layoffs are driven by AI. And, there's evidence that there's some layoffs that are driven by AI, some that are not. In fact, coincidentally, Evangelos, this week's Economist has an article about human resources departments and how they've grown. And it closes with a survey from McKinsey, which basically one of the top line items there is that 22 respondents of that survey said that they were cutting down the HR function, and that a lot of that has to do with the rise of AI. Now, with that said, some people are saying, well, maybe AI is not the sole cause, because obviously economy is complex, right? So maybe some of these announcements, they're just using AI as kind of a justification, what people are calling AI washing, I guess. And there's also the idea that maybe people overhired during the pandemic, and so this is just right-sizing the size of teams. Although, of course, if you're one of these people laid off, you would object to that characterization. But on the other hand, there's multiple studies which already are showing something that Evangelos and I have discussed before, which is the junior pipeline is contracting. So the whole hollowing out idea. But so Evangelos, do you have anything to say in terms of how much AI is causing these layoffs?
Well, I've started thinking about this in terms of what reasons corporations give. And I would start, frankly, with some advice that we give to the corporations we work with. And as part of the transformation that we believe is necessary with the adoption of AI technologies, we believe that the barriers, organizational barriers, need to come down in order for the adoption to be effective. So we recommend organizations to think about bringing together HR and product and business units so that there are not going to be the barriers, the silos that we often find in organizations. We think that by bringing these organizations together, you will be able to make much more effective decisions of how to use AI. And we're starting to see some companies merging HR with product, HR and IT. So we're seeing some of these barriers coming down, but I don't think we've seen yet the kind of full-scale transformation that I believe will be necessary as corporations become AI-centric, which means that many of their business processes become AI first. Now, when I go into more detail, I see.
What about the notion? What about the notion of AI causing the layoffs? What's your take on this?
Yeah, so I'm seeing three types of changes. First, I'll take what Accenture announced, which is they're saying if we find employees that cannot be upskilled to AI, then we're going to let them go. So this is one reason, and I think Accenture, which has
hundreds of thousands of employees, this is an announcement not yet implemented.
According to their CEO, it's going to be implemented quickly.
Okay.
Then the second category is announcements or layoffs because their jobs are being replaced by automation. And this is, we saw that in Klarna. Actually, Klarna, of course, laid off most of their customer support people, then they hired some people back. But I think we're seeing a number of these kind of actions, and some of it goes back to your to the topic that you and I discussed, is hollowing out, right? That we're letting more junior people, or we're hiring fewer people, and all that. The third, much smaller
Oh,
category, which actually is
So
something.
the second one
Yeah,
seems mixed because the example you cited, they walked it back
they walked it back, but they did not walk it back in a
entirely.
full way. So you still had net layoffs, right?
Okay.
The third point is last week I was at Caltech. I'm on the advisory board there, and we were talking about the layoff that Meta did of their R&D team, their AI R&D team.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it caught my attention because essentially they said that, well, these people are being laid off because they're not focusing on the right AI themes or on the right AI approaches. And I think that's dangerous, right? I think that there is we are becoming comfortable with the current state of the AI technology and maybe become enamored by it. And I don't think that we should. I think and I think also this ties off to the broader layoff picture. I think that there is enterprises that are using AI in a big way are starting to have trust issues. Again, I would point to what happened with Deloitte and the Australian government, right, where they had to give back money to the Australian government because the report that they submitted as a final report to a project contained a lot of errors. The other thing that I'm monitoring is we're seeing a drop in the usage of code automation tools when we move from prototype to full system development, right? Because when you're starting to face the complexity of the full-blown system as opposed to a prototype, again, enterprises are starting to realize that these code automation tools have certain issues, right? Maybe give wrong answers, maybe they're not as
Or
capable when.
maybe also that code automation, I think, is always overblown to me because I think that almost everyone uses it as an augmentation tool. But any enterprise who thinks that they can eliminate their developers, I think, is mistaken. By the way, on the Meta
Exactly.
thing, you raise an important point there, which is kind of there's a bit of a groupthink going on, right? So, and part of it, I think, is competitive pressure, right? Because basically, if you scale your models, you go the direction of large language models, and you scale them, and you release a slightly better model, then your competitors feels obligated to follow you. Otherwise, their models, at least to the users, are perceived to be inferior. So everyone seems to be chasing or searching in the same area. And in the Meta case, that's also slightly clouded by the fact that maybe some of the people they laid off were brought on by the old AI leadership, and
It could be.
and so there,
Yeah.
we want to bring in our own people, right? So
My point is, I think that, and you talked about it a minute ago about as groupthink, but my point is that if we still need to address serious issues around even the approaches, the deep neural network approaches and the transformer approaches that we have been using over the past few years. And I think it's a fallacy to consider that all we need now is more data and more compute. I think we need new approaches. I'll give you actually
at least textual data we've run out. Maybe data for robotics we could use more, But I think part of it, like I said, Evangelos, is that there's a bit of a cat and mouse game here. Because basically, if I decide, okay, I'm going to do something completely different, I can't necessarily do that. Maybe the best I can do is assign a small group of people to chase other approaches, right? Because otherwise, I might get left behind momentarily and then lose users to other groups, right? So.
Yeah, look, I'll give you a couple of examples again from the work that we're doing. We have been, again,
Oh, by the
many
way,
corporations are starting.
we should go back to the layoffs topic at some point.
Yeah, well, no, but it's related to this. So,
Yeah.
We are, a number of corporations are starting to experiment with agents, both software agents and then embodied AI agents. And as you and I have discussed, we have been developing, our firm has been developing this spectrum of agency. And one of the things that we have done more recently is to start saying, well, what type of connected data do you need to present to those agents for training? And more importantly, what kind of models you need to use? Because a lot of what we see in enterprises is use of, I would call them vanilla conversational models. And these are not the right way to approach as the agent's capabilities need to expand, right? So you need to be thinking about large reasoning models and large action models. And that's why, to me, that's one way of thinking about that. We need new approaches so we cannot be resting on our laurels, in a sense, based on what we have achieved today. That's my only concern about laying people off, that rather than keep pushing on different ways and thinking of different ways. I mean, that group thing to me is very dangerous, because even though AI this time around has achieved important milestones, we haven't solved the complete problem yet. And I think it's a fallacy to be thinking differently. But anyway, so going back to layoffs, I think that we have layoffs due to untrainability, if I can call it that, layoffs due to augmentation or automation. In other words, where the people are replaced by machines. And we'll see how that evolves. I don't think we have a definitive answer, though, today.
So the other thing that I would like to highlight on the layoffs front is, I'm not sure how to characterize this, but kind of this, and this might be more, Evangelos, endemic to tech companies, right? So there's definitely a move among tech companies to really flatten. So kind of middle managers that only manage 5 people, this kind of thing. And some of it is AI related. In fact, I've seen studies where technology companies feel like roles where your role is mainly coordinating, they feel like they can replace you with AI or force you back to an individual contributor role. So what's your sense of so definitely if you're kind of in this middle management role where your team isn't super big, that's a precarious situation to be, I think, right?
Yes, I would agree, but I would like to kind of switch it, to turn it a little bit and say the following. There is, because of the investments that are being made, starting with the investments by hyperscalers, but also the investments that enterprises feel that they need to be making if they're going to stay in the game, so to speak. There's starting to be a concern of what am I, A, can I afford it? B, how can I show some type of ROI because I'm making these investments? And I think that will become a lot more critical for enterprises than for hyperscalers. I think in the case of hyperscalers, as I've been saying, and I'll say next week in this keynote that I have, AI needs to become a utility, right? It needs to be viewed as a utility, and utilities have a lot of upfront costs, right? think of internet, think of electricity. I mean, don't have the word, think of water, right? So somebody needs to incur that. In this case, hyperscalers are taking that. The question then becomes, for the users of that utility, what type of horizon they need to set, but also how much they need to spend to be spending in order to use that utility. Again, even in our everyday life, right? When electricity rates go up, consumers complain and say, well, why is my bill so high? I think that this is something that corporations are starting to face. I mean, they're facing some pretty significant bills now as they move from prototypes to deployed systems. And I think that is also driving some of the decisions. How do I show that I have some return on that investment?
So yeah, so to close this layoff segment, I do think that there is something behind these headlines that AI is causing layoffs. Not all of these layoffs obviously are due to AI, but an increasing amount of them are. And as I highlighted, some roles are particularly being impacted. One is seems like the junior pipeline roles that we discussed. And then increasingly, this middle management layer where you're coordinating a handful of people. Almost all the tech companies seem to be targeting this. I would not be surprised if the rest of the Fortune 500 start doing this as well, not just in technology, in banks. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
a lot
that's
of
what
this
I'm focusing on.
Yeah,
I mean, I see, as I said, the tech industry, followed by the knowledge services industry. That's why I mentioned Accenture, Deloitte, and then going down to other industries: financial services, manufacturing, automotive, hospitality. That's where that's how I'm monitoring the progression of how AI is absorbed and what are the implications of that absorption to their employee bases.
All right, so topic number 2, which Evangelos started, which is basically the notion that companies need to start kind of thinking about recovering or justifying some of their capital investment. So the thing in the headlines that you increasingly see these days, of course, is the massive investments in data centers, so trillions and trillions of dollars, even by some companies that have not much revenue. They're somewhat in the news. So a classic example, I don't know how much you follow Evangelos CoreWeave, right? But CoreWeave is signing all these contracts right and left. And also, they're also part of this phenomenon that Evangelos and I discussed last time, which is the circular financing phenomenon where CoreWeave somehow has investors in OpenAI and NVIDIA, but in their customer is OpenAI, and NVIDIA is obviously their supplier. And the interesting thing to me about CoreWeave too, Evangelos, is that they're not from Silicon Valley. So they were historically people who were Bitcoin miners. So they're from back east in the East Coast. So they're much more comfortable with debt financing. So in Silicon Valley, of course, at least the top companies always in their earnings calls will brag about, this is how much cash we have. We have no debt. We have this much cash. So debt is not a usual thing in the playbook in Silicon Valley, but CoreWeave at least seems to be comfortable with it. And they pride themselves in, we're from finance, we do risk management, and so on and so forth. But anyway, so that I got derailed there. But the larger question is ROI on these investments in AI. And by the way, Evangelos, we discussed this last time in that, obviously you have ROI as the ultimate goal, but the short-term justification for AI, as we discussed, is usually around 4 buckets, right? So productivity improvement, cost reduction, new revenue generation, and capability expansion. But ultimately, you would think that however you justify it, there should be some ROI at the end.
So you've loaded a bunch of interesting topics here. So let me let me take them from the top. I actually think that for the first time, even Silicon Valley companies are starting to think about debt.
They're starting
Google,
now.
So
would you say this is like just the last 12 months, right?
Actually, I would say even less than that, but 12 months is it. The second point is that there's a lot of build-out capacity for obviously data centers, as you said, and the critical resource that is missing is energy. So in a lot of these, there are a number now of data centers that have been built and equipped, but they cannot get power in.
By the way, I would throw in one more news item that missed my radar for a little while, which is TSMC. Apparently, all these companies are upset at TSMC because TSMC can't produce enough of the AI chips. So, for example, example, it's not just NVIDIA, but anyone who has an ASIC is upset at TSMC.
The third point I would make is that monitoring a lot of what's happening with China and what is the implications there with ROI. And I will put it in 2 buckets. First of all, there are a number of open source Chinese models that are being distributed. And I think companies are starting to look at them seriously because they are capable, but also they bring the cost down. And I think that's something that the hyperscalers and model providers, such as AI, will need to pay close attention to that before they're locked out of the...
There's also the ecosystem, like you said, ecosystem implications. And obviously, they're capable of doing it. I mean, I was talking to people at Google, right? So if they wanted to, they could release a much bigger version of Gemma, much more capable. Meta had Llama, but then that got derailed. And who knows with this new AI team if they're going to have any open weights models at all, right? So.
Exactly. And the next point about China is also something that you and I have discussed in passing, at least in the past, which is they're showing how much you can do with older generation or with less capable hardware. And if that's the case, then that has 2 implications. On the one hand, it benefits the enterprise because it brings the cost down, right? You don't have to always have the latest and greatest and pay for the latest and greatest. That doesn't bode well for companies like NVIDIA, right, or even AMD that are looking to always sell you the latest so that we can have bigger model, faster inference, whatever. So those are going to be...
Yeah, I'd like to interject one thing on the AI chips in China. It is true that they are able to train these models with less capable chips, partly because Xi Jinping told them you have to use these less capable chips. But anecdotally, I can tell you that they all want the latest chips.
There's no question about it.
They're just being forced to use them, right? So
again, I'm not going to get into all I'm trying to say is that like they showed with DeepSeek. They're showing that for certain operations, many of which are important for a enterprise, you don't need the cutting edge technology, and you can do things with
maybe the implication there is there will be some group out here in the West who will adopt that same playbook, right? So.
Anyway, so but to me, these are things to look at on that side, particularly, as I said, if we're going to make if we want to make AI a utility, as I believe we need to make AI a utility. AI should not be looked at as a niche technology.
And China obviously also has a much more coherent energy strategy in that
Yes.
they do not renounce any kind of energy source, right? So they use wind,
Yes.
solar, nuclear, coal, everything, right? So
Yes. Now, looking at the other side on the enterprise, I agree that it is dangerous, or maybe it's not appropriate. Maybe I shouldn't use the word to be looking for ROI in prototypes, in pilots. However, I think, and we advise this all of our customers and all of our startups, that you need to be thinking ahead in terms of how you're going to build your ROI function in order to show that your scaled system, right, your scaled AI-centric system provides significant value to your client, right, to the enterprise. And if you cannot do that, then there is a risk of facing the prospect that the pilot will never make it into a deployed system. So now, whether should you be looking at an ROI at a positive ROI for that deployed system 1 year after its deployment, 2 years after its deployment, I think that's where it will differ both on an industry by industry case, but also on a use case by use case situation. So, for example, a customer support system in the hospitality industry may have a very different ROI function than a customer support system in the manufacturing industry. I do not know yet. That's what I imagine based on past experience. But I think it is important to be thinking about what are the components that will go into this ROI calculation, even from the time that you are building your pilot. I think that too many of the pilots that we see today are only driven by technology considerations, maybe because of the hype that vendors are creating or because of the pressure that boards are putting on management teams, and they're not looking into a more holistic reason to how to select the use case to put it into a pilot, and then how to evaluate the pilot and decide whether to deploy it. And I think that both the hyperscalers with their investment, but also the enterprises with their pilots, need to be thinking along those lines.
By the way, on the technology side, the one observation that I have concluded recently is that actually the technologies seem to be much more aware of this maybe than even the business users in the following sense, right? So before the advent of generative AI, there was a emerging role around MLOps, right? So, but that was a lot different because back then the models were smaller, right? So MLOps was around containerization basically and deployment and things like that. And now with LLM, people are saying, we need a new role called LLMOps, which because basically the models are bigger. But then when you talk to people who are in this field, it becomes clear right away that LLMOps is basically what we used to call FinOps. So basically their main focus is costs, right? So token economics, cloud costs, and so on and so forth. So the technology teams
but also
very quickly realized this, by the way, because basically anytime you turn it on and the users engage, right? So the costs spike, right? So depending on how you deploy these systems and the serving mechanism, the serving setup you have. But my point is that cost is something that the tech teams seem to be ahead of.
Yes, I will make two additions to what you said. First of all, I think that The issue of trust is starting to come into the LLM ops. So explainability, governance, all of that.
That's table stakes, right? So yeah.
And the second thing is, again, with regards to cost, as we're moving to higher level agents, companies are starting to wonder, do I need the verbosity of a vanilla LLM or maybe even a foundation model, or do I need something that is much more compact, much more specialized to the task that I'm doing, right? So that I can contain the cost, so that I can contain, because even though I think the cost per token has decreased dramatically, it's still, as you said, if you have many users and the number of tokens
like you said, the architecture that you decide. By the way, I want to give a commercial for my field guide for agents, which I cover some of these things. But yeah, so the interesting thing is that the tech teams seem to be aware. I don't know if the business teams that you talk to are aware of costs. Yeah.
Well, and this is why, again, I'll go back to the comment that I made earlier, which is we as Synapse advocate that these teams need to be coming together. You cannot have the barriers of technology team running a pilot on its own, and at some point the business unit receives that pilot, over the wall. And then at some point you go to the HR department and say, well, I need X number of people in order to staff the system that I'm going to, or the effort of for deploying the system, and then going to the CFO and saying, here's how much money I need. Those four functions need to come together as part of, and it needs to start kind of like with your strategy for AI, but they need to come together as part of the transformation that the company needs to undertake in order to, as it tries to become AI-centric and as it tries to incorporate AI into its business processes.
And with that, thank you, Evangelos. And again, go to the episode notes. I'll place links to some of the resources we discussed.